Okay, everyone, we'll reconvene the meeting for tonight. This is the Committee of the Whole meeting, February 5th, 2024. We started earlier and we closed the meeting down for the public hearing, and now we've reconvened. The time is 8:10. So first I need an adoption of the agenda. Motion? Councillor Reid?
I also move the agenda as presented.
All in favor? Carried. And adoption of the previous minutes. Someone make a motion? Councillor McFadden? All in favor? Unanimous. So tonight, the first thing that we have on the agenda is Parks and Recreation Committee 2024 and 2025 work plan. Ms. DeLorme.
Good evening. Switch to the... There we go. All right, good evening, Mr. Mayor and Deputy Mayor and Council. I'm here this evening to present the Parks and Recreation Committee work plan for the years 2024-2025. Through the terms of reference, the Parks and Recreation Committee functions as a key advisory committee to Council on matters pertaining to Cochrane's Parks and Recreation Services. The 2024-2025 work plan has been structured to empower committee members with engaging and purposeful tasks, ensuring their contributions provide valuable advice to Council's decisions when recommendations are required. The committee's tasks for 2024-2025 are multifaceted and crucial to shaping the future of Parks and Recreation in Cochrane from a community lens. The committee will review and provide feedback on essential policy documents, including Envision Cochrane 2050, the Bow River Strategy, the Parks, Recreation and Culture Master Plan, and the Connectivity Plan. Additionally, the committee will provide recommendations on Council's recreation priorities, ensure the development of community parks aligns with residents' needs, and engage with community groups. Furthermore, the committee will submit an annual report to Council, allowing for the evaluation of the committee's success. In alignment with the terms of reference, the committee's scope encompasses reviewing community parks and recreation services, effective usage of parks and recreation infrastructure and programming, inviting submissions from community groups and administration, addressing issues referred by Council, making recommendations on projects or programming, review and provide input into capital budgets, and complying with the Town of Cochrane Procedural Bylaw and Municipal Government Act. The work plan aligns with the Town of Cochrane's strategic objectives. It reinforces Cochrane's commitment to livability, connectivity, identity, open spaces, natural areas, a vibrant economy, a built environment, organizational resiliency, and financial and environmental stewardship. The option brought forward this evening is that the Committee of the Whole endorses the Parks and Recreation Committee work plan as presented. Thank you, and I'm happy to take any questions if you have any.
Okay, thank you for your presentation.
Deputy Mayor, if I may, just before you jump into that, I just want to commend Michelle, who was incredibly patient to make this report because she waited through the entire public hearing last time. So this has been a little while coming. So appreciate Michelle's patience making the report tonight.
Thank you for joining us through all that. Councillor Reid, question?
Two questions. And with all due respect to the current chair, why it would be the only town committee that actually has a council member as chair. Why are you proposing that, and why not just have a chair elected amongst the membership?
Through the chair, I might actually ask Mike to answer that because I don't have the history on that.
I may be able to provide some context. At the time that the committee was struck, that was actually a request by members of council at the time that the chair be the member of council that's appointed to the committee. So the terms of reference actually speaks to that. That's absolutely something that council could choose to change at any time if they so wish. We would just bring back a procedural bylaw amendment.
Yeah, I've been around long enough to remember that, and I thought the reason why was that we didn't have a staff member in place who could actually provide continuity. I think we have that now, and so I would propose that we change this to a town council member, but not necessarily appointed as chair. And then the second question I had, if I could, is on that the document that you had up there initially under excuse me, open space and natural areas. There are a number of natural and open space and areas that are in our community that are not parks. So who would be responsible for that?
Thank you, and perhaps I would ask also Councillor McFadden and her experience on this committee to add to this. But I think we, when we think about the work that this committee does, is that we would consider it to be where we recreate and use leisure activities, including our natural areas, those that are, I would say, fully developed and those that are still relatively natural or of consideration. What I would be cautious of is ensuring that this committee's it's not a conservation committee or an environmental committee, and so just making a distinction between the activities that are taking place there versus some of the other factors. And I don't know, Councillor McFadden, if that aligns with your thinking on that as well.
Yeah, I think it does, Mr. Derek Cott. I think overall, like when we were first creating the terms of reference, it first initially started as the parks, and it was trying to like kind of come up with a plan or the approach to the ranch in Midford and our parks. And then council kind of evolved the terms of reference to include recreation. So I think when you look at the, I mean, this is an evolving group, and I think the terms of reference can evolve as well. But I think it's more along lines, I mean, of course, the committee can do whatever work council assigns it to do. So if there's something that council wants it to speak to or to review in regarding the natural areas, they can, of course. But, and that was kind of one of the points in mapping out the work plan, is so that we could be clear on what council is empowering and the expectations of this group. And as you can see, with council's approval and the budget of a lot of parks and recreation pieces, this group will be tasked to provide kind of the recreation and parks lens to those policy pieces. So at the end of the day, just as a refresher, the point of this group has always been about being advisory to council, not a decision-making piece to council. And so this was, I think we sat down, yourself and the manager of parks and myself, and worked through this. I think Mr. Schultz also fed into this slightly. So yeah, a good step to give a 2-year work plan, and I think in even looking at the first 3 or 4 months to kind of mapped out as to the work that can be done between the COVID kind of offset things and the staff shortage that we had, that, and I certainly agree with you. I certainly feel that we are starting to staff that up and starting to feel like we've got a great team in place, and I've really enjoyed working with them in recent months to have that ability to start being able to deliver again, because there was some really great work done in feeding into the Horse Creek Sports Park plan, and then and that delegation day we did back in the day, and then feeding into the trails plan. But this plan, the intent of it is to get the group back up to more of a policy level and out of the weeds in the work piece.
Yeah, if I could, I think there is an interest, and I certainly, might even bring forth a notice of motion in terms of being able to establish a task force to look at the river valleys and areas outside of natural areas that are outside our current park system, if that would be the appetite of council. Because I think, while I'm happy to support what's being proposed here, I think it's pretty ambitious, and I think there should be perhaps a task force, kind of like the task force we had that Councillor Flowers was party to look at the kind of opportunities we have as it relates to our natural areas beyond the parks. So our river valleys and streams, and so if it's understood that it's not part of this particular group's work, then maybe there's a place for somebody else, another group, to do that. So thank you.
Okay, Councillor Fidego.
Thank you. I only have one question, and I was asked from a member of this organization. So we have one member of the Cochrane District Ag Society that's a non-voting member. I was asked if we would consider to allow a member of the Cochrane Lions Rodeo to also be a member, to sit there as a non-voting member, or if there was a reason, and I'm not sure, maybe Councillor McFadden, is it because it's a Rocky View area, but I was just approached and asked if I would bring that forward and as a possible advocate for them. They're a non-voting member anyway, so.
Councillor McFadden.
Yeah, I'll take the first stab, and then you can provide your lens, because we did talk about that when we were reviewing kind of the terms of reference and who was what, and maybe you have to remember, council created, do you remember this meeting? We created the terms of reference kind of on the fly, and recreation got added into it. But how it's been functioning since it was formed was that the 3 members that are on there, so it's the Rocky View School Board, it's the Ag Society, and Spray Lakes, thank you, is more along lines, what was the final word we settled? Not necessarily landholders, but kind of where the recreation happens, pieces of it. And so while the Lions do have that space, there's just really, at the end of the day, only so many stakeholders we could have at the table, but it was council that did determine who those members would be. And then we were trying to balance out the size of the committee, those type of things, when council created this back in the day. We do also, though, it is a committee of council and open to the public. And so be more than, glad to invite them to come in and be a member of the gallery. So that's my first take on that. I don't know if that fits with administration's thoughts.
Absolutely, and through the chair, I'll add a little bit to that as well. We are actually building out a sport and recreation interagency group. So that is going to allow all of the sport and recreation groups within the community to sit at the same table and information share and resource share. And I see the Lions as like a perfect fit at that table. They have been identified, and we are working on creating that group. So there will be a spot for them within the sport and recreation community in Cochrane.
Okay.
So sorry if I may. I don't think it was ever the intent of council that this committee be the answer to all recreation amenities. It was meant to kind of be that first starting point of that policy development, because it was, this kind of started back in the day when all of a sudden pickleball showed up and council had no idea where pickleball had come from in the priority list. And so the intent of the creation of the committee initially was to give the public an opportunity to bring that public lens to what the priorities are for parks and recreation. But in having a chance to work with our new management team in the recreation space, there's a lot of thought being going on to how do we engage and get all of the different recreation groups out of their silos and working together. And as we know, we're getting more and more, presentations from groups. Pick your sports, pick your group that is really hard pressed for space and are advocating for a change. And we just can't put them all in one working committee. So what are you calling it?
Sport and recreation interagency.
Yeah, an interagency group that is being kind of crafted. I'm not too sure the timeline on that, but we are trying to certainly increase that capacity for our residents and our stakeholder groups to have a say in recreation in Cochrane.
Maybe what I can do is pass on some of the information just that I got, because I think they have a couple of people that might be kind of keen to join, and whether or not that's to just sit in on a meeting or whether or not it's for the next steps, but at least I'll start to connect the dots just because they did express interest, and I don't want to rather not leave anybody out. So if that's a case that they can join, then that's fine by me.
That'd be wonderful.
And we were having a chat as we're building capacity in that committee again. We just started holding the meetings back in this room. That we might be able, because it is a public committee, to start streaming those again. When during COVID we had it Zoom, I think we were doing it at that point. But we had this discussion that we might give ourselves a couple months to kind of get our feet underneath us with the new committee and the new workload, but to be able to build that into our capacity as well and have that streamed, because it's very important, I think, to all of council that the public be able to see the work that we do.
Okay.
Deputy Mayor, if I may just add, I think to a couple of the points that have been raised in terms of the composition of the committee and the terms of reference as well. I suspect that as we engage in this broad master planning that council has advanced through this recent budget, that there will become pieces that influence perhaps what a group like this looks like. So I think we're at an opportune time as the committee begins its work and we go through this process that a year from now or 18 months from now we'll have gathered a whole bunch of information that may have a significant influence on how we want to build this interface for our community going forward, including as Michelle noted and Councillor Reid, that there may be other opportunities to create spaces for different conversations to take place, and that this was never intended, again, to piggyback on one of Councillor McFadden's comment, to be the place where everything is discussed as part of that. And so getting some clarity on that, and it's always important to have a work plan. I think the clarity of work plan, which is why this is in front of council, this is what this committee is focused on at this point. Otherwise, if you go too far afield, it can be really difficult to be productive.
Okay, thank you. Mayor Junong.
Yeah, thank you. Appreciate the presentation and the work plan in front of us. First, just speaking to the terms of reference, I think Mr. Derricott's spoken to it well, as others. We can amend this at our, whatever, at our will, I guess, as a committee of council. I would note that that the chair is a member of council currently, but a non-voting member. So that does kind of take and change it for me from having a position of council, sitting at a position of chair, and then having a position of influence at the same time. So I think some of the concerns around chairing, are not really something that I'm too wound up about. Number two, this is not an advocating body. It's not a committee that's, if you don't have a seat at the table, that you're going to miss out on something. And that goes for any kind of group in our community. So with that, I would dovetail my next comment into assigning work. And a part of the work plan, the two things I think are, I think I heard loud and clear from Councillor McFadden that there's also the ability to assign work as council deems fit. That's still in addition to this work plan. Yep. So two things that I would highlight, and Horse Creek Sports Park I think still needs to remain on here just as a ongoing, and maybe that's something we can do as that comes back to council. And the Glenbow Pathway project that we talked about during budget, I think that would be another one that should land on this committee's plate. And I guess the thing that where I see this committee actually finding its feet and gaining more traction in in these chambers are that we look at them as more of providing opinion to council. And I've looked at it through the lens of like CPC, where planning documents go through and then we receive like a real, specific lens of what that committee's up to. So the same with Parks and Rec. So for me, I think this is a good work plan, and in addition to, and other duties as required. The last piece is, I just want to comment that as a member of the committee through this Spray Lake Sawmill Center, I haven't made all the meetings, but I'm trying to, with my schedule, trying to renegotiate that so I can make more of them. But I have noticed that we've made great strides in the area of structure of the committee. I don't know if that's from your presence, Ms. DeLorme, so thank you for that, and from Legislative Services for making a structure that's similar to our council meetings, similar to the structure that we're used to, and also providing a framework in which I think is easier to operate in. So I think all of those kind of things pointing us in the right direction, we're going to see some value from the Parks and Rec Committee. So I support the work plan in addition to the caveat of adding to it as we see. Thank you, Ms. Chair.
Councillor McFadden.
Yeah, I did want to pass on that kudos as well. And that just is certainly in the short term, seeing the value of having the resources at the table. The last agenda it looks very much like what you'd see at the CPC. It's very clear, and so certainly seeing a quick maturity of that, which I really appreciate, so thank you very much. And we've also again, my number one goal with this is to empower our residents as part of our decision-making process. We also have the group elected a vice chair. I keep making up the different titles for that, and so that person has been elected with the kind of part of my strategy there would be to create a bit of a succession planning so that when council does get to the point that we want to amend the terms of reference and perhaps make this more reflective of our committees, we do have that capacity in place. It's just this committee has been stalled out twice between COVID and some staff shortages in being able to really make progress. So, but between the appointments that council made of this group, it's a really exciting group to be able to work with, and the staffing we have on this committee, and then a clear work plan of what's expected. I am really excited to be part of the work of this group.
Great. I don't see any other lights. The only couple comments I had were I love the idea of the interagency group. I think FCSS has a strong group and they get together, there's a synergy, they get to work together and get to know each other, and I think it would be valuable for recreation to have that. And the other thing was, we often get requests from different groups for funding, and there's no real pot of funding for recreation. And I wondered if that group could look at that and maybe make a recommendation to council about how it could work, or maybe it won't work, and the kinds of things that we could fund.
Yeah, I think that's, through the chair, I think that's a great idea. We are working towards every single group that we're working with. We're trying to drive them towards the Parks and Recreation Committee so that the committee can start hearing the needs of the community. And I do hope that the ideas start to percolate of a pot of money for recreation and sports groups. But that's not currently on the work plan right now, but it's something that could potentially happen. I just wanted to make a quick note. It wasn't just me that has made this committee amazing. It's definitely the Ledge Services team that has supported that.
Okay, yeah, I'd love to see it looked at and added, just to brainstorm whether it could work or not and what it would look like. I know that I get a lot of requests from seniors groups that are bringing people here for sports activities, and there's no way I can really help them, as well as the Legion for their darts group and different things that are going on. Ms. Lowe, did you have a comment?
I did, just a couple of things. Just for council's information, this will come back to your next regular council meeting for formal endorsement by council of the work plan, as well as Deputy Chair, you were indicating that, you know, you would like to see a recreation grant. You may recall that in the budget, it was included in the community services budget. There was money set aside. We just have to develop that policy to establish what that would look like.
Okay, thank you. Seeing no other lights, thank you for your presentation. Did you get everything you need?
Yes, thank you.
Okay. Moving on to the next piece of business is the Jim Uffelmann Park Environmental Study. Trish, how do you pronounce your last name?
Kluwani.
Kluwine?
Yes.
I've never used it before. Welcome.
Thank you. So good evening, Mr. Mayor and Council. This evening, I am presenting the summary and findings and recommendations of the Jim Uffelmann environmental study. So long before Jim Uffelmann Park was named, it has served Cochrane citizens as an off-leash area with ample green space and river access for dogs and outdoor enthusiasts alike. Over the years, as the space has gained popularity, recreational challenges and environmental concerns have been noticed. In late 2022, the town of Cochrane procured the services of EDS Group, Inc. to conduct an unbiased environmental assessment of Jim Uffelmann Park. This study examined the environmental health of the park based on current recreational uses, environmental sensitivities, and geotechnical assessments. So to begin, a phase 1 environmental assessment and a geotechnical desktop study were conducted. These studies included a review of all available records and historical information of the green space, as well as any of the surrounding properties within 100 meters of the park. A review of the various geologic and hydrogeologic mapping for the area, and a review of the historical aerial photos and provincial flood mapping. On-site visits were also conducted to evaluate the impact that present activities have in and around the site, and a site review was conducted to observe any concerns pertaining to erosion, sedimentation, and runoff. Both studies revealed several considerations for the park in its current condition and for future development. So due to past and present activities on lands that surround the site, a more in-depth phase 2 ESA would be conducted if we were to consider significant enhancements to the green space. There is also substantial erosion occurring along portions of the riverbank, and a lack of vegetation within the green space has added to this problem. There is a possibility of that erosion eventually encroaching upon the existing pathway and park's furniture, and because of this, future development along the crest of the riverbank is not recommended. There are 2 natural gas pipelines that intersect on the west end of the park near the River Avenue parking lot, and these pipelines would require careful consideration before planning, and any future additions such as structures could be made to the green space. Any additions such as structures within the floodway or the flood fringe are not recommended unless they are properly designed to accommodate settlement, erosion, and settlement and erosion caused by flooding events. And finally, any disturbance to the park or along the riverbank that has the potential of affecting the river would need to be done in accordance with the Alberta Water Act. Along with the Phase 1 ESA and geotechnical assessments, EDS also undertook monthly site assessments to have a more fulsome understanding of usage patterns within the park. Field data collected, along with additional research, revealed several considerations for the green space. Jim Uffelmann Park lies within a key biodiversity and wildlife zone, and this habitat quality within this zone is of increased importance. According to the Alberta Fish and Wildlife Management Information System, the listed sensitive or special concern species on the screen are said to be present in or around the park itself. Natural forces and park use has caused some degradation of the overall site, and the environmental state of the park could be improved. During the site assessment, some conflicts were observed between user groups. However, overall, everyone was able to use the park with relatively few concerns being noted. So understanding the importance of this site to the community and citizens' desire to provide input, an extensive community engagement plan was developed. This plan contained multiple engagement tactics to ensure the community was aware of the project and everyone had an opportunity to have their say. Internal and external stakeholder workshops were conducted. A public survey was conducted to give people an opportunity to provide feedback. The project was advertised on social media as well in local newspapers and on local radio. Signage was placed throughout the off-leash dog parks in town and at various town facilities. A dedicated project website was created and continually updated as the project progressed. 2 official media releases were done to notify residents of the project and the public survey. And finally, staff were available at the Cochrane Trade Show with information and an opportunity for citizens to provide feedback and participate in the public survey. So in January of 2023, an internal workshop was held with Town of Cochrane staff. The intent of this workshop was to gather insight from staff who are most familiar with the park, its day-to-day use, maintenance, and operations. 12 staff members representing 6 different departments attended, and 4 themes were explored during the workshop: protection of the natural environment, recreation, connectivity, and education. Staff discussed environmental concerns such as invasive weeds, presence of wildlife in the park, as well as the erosion occurring along the riverbanks. They noted a variety of recreational activities they have observed while working in the park, including walking, cycling, running, water activities, fishing, organized events such as footstock, and of course, dog walking. Staff were also asked if they had ever observed conflict between user groups in the park, incidents of near misses between cyclists and off-leash dogs, pedestrians and cyclists, and off-leash dogs and children were all noted. Regarding connectivity, staff discussed ways of slowing people down as they move through the park, as well as the increased pressure the park may experience in the future, as it has been identified as a potential route for the Trans-Canada Trail. River connectivity was also discussed, along with possible impacting river projects being considered, including the potential of a future downstream dam. River connectivity was identified as being an important component for both the park and the town as a whole. And when discussing education, staff felt a combination of regulatory, etiquette, interpretive, and wayfinding signage would benefit park users, as well as promote environmental stewardship and proper sharing of the space. In February 2023, a workshop of external stakeholders was held here at the Ranch House, and 23 separate organizations were invited to attend based on their involvement in, proximity to, or direct use of the park on a regular basis. 20 individuals representing 11 different stakeholder groups accepted the invitation and attended the workshop. Once again, the 4 themes of protection of the natural environment, recreation, connectivity, and education were discussed. Environmental findings included issues with freestanding water and mud in the park after a rain event or during the spring thaw, fluctuating river levels and ice flow impacting vegetation along the riverbanks, erosion of the riverbanks, and presence of wildlife within the park. Recreational activities observed or participated in included dog walking and dog training, socializing and enjoying the park, jogging and cycling, bird watching, and fishing. It is important to note that during the winter months, the primary activity within the park is off-leash dog walking. When discussing connectivity, groups were asked if their organization was in favor of the park being a commuter route. Responses included, "It's a nice idea, but maybe not the best location." "The commuter route should go through Greystone." And "No, this isn't a good idea because commuter speed is what's causing the primary cause of conflict within the park." When exploring education, groups were supportive of improved regulatory etiquette, interpretive, and wayfinding signage. And when asked about conflicts observed in the park, responses noted included conflict between cyclists and runners, conflict between cyclists and walkers, conflict between cyclists and dog owners, and occasional conflict between dogs themselves. So with internal and external stakeholder engagement completed, the next step was to reach out and engage the people who use the park the most, the public. It was essential to hear from the public in order to gauge the current uses, patterns, likes, and dislikes, along with the overall sentiment towards the park and its current condition. A public survey was conducted from April 20th to May 22nd, and we received over 1,150 responses. Overall, there was a good representation of respondents across each age group. However, we see the majority of respondents, 51%, being aged 35 to 54 years. The second most represented group was 55 to 64 at 18%, followed closely by 18 to 34 years old at 16%. And what did we hear? So respondents were asked what was the main reason they used Jim Uffelmann Park, and the vast majority, 69%, stated off-leash dog walking. Second was leisure walking, third cycling, fourth nature appreciation, and fifth leisure running and jogging. When asked how often do you visit Jim Uffelmann Park, the most common response at 28% was 3 or more times per week. The second most common response was 26%, or was 20%, The second most common response at 26% was daily. When asked if people viewed the park as a recreational destination or a commuter route, 80% indicated they viewed it as a destination in itself, rather than a means to get from one place to another. When asked about conflict, 41% of respondents indicated that they have observed conflict while using the park, while 59% have not. Respondents were also asked how safe they feel when using the park. 88% of respondents indicated that they feel safe or very safe while using the green space. And we took that question one step further and asked park users with off-leash dogs and park users without off-leash dogs how safe they felt while using the green space. 92% of users with off-leash dogs feel safe or very safe while at the park, and 79% of park users without off-leash dogs feel safe or very safe while visiting Jim Uffelmann Park. These numbers are of important note because this project was largely initiated due to the number of safety concerns reported to town staff and municipal enforcement. However, the data collected from the public survey contradicts this. The majority of respondents feel safe or very safe while using the green space. Next, respondents were asked if there were any environmental features of significance we should be aware of. The number one answer was the river, followed closely by bank erosion. People were also asked what they believe would make visitors feel more safe when visiting the park, and 40% responded posted rules and etiquette. When asking respondents specifically about educational and interpretive signage, 80% would support an educational signage program at the park. And while the park is already well connected, the community feels the top 3 connections to Jim Uffelmann Park in order are Spray Lake Sawmill, the connections to the community of Greystone, and connections to the Trans-Canada Trail. And finally, when asked what respondents think Jim Uffelmann Park should be catered towards, the number 1 answer was dogs, followed by walking, and then everyone. So by the fall of 2023, the environmental study had reached approximately 80% completion, and the draft recommendations had been formulated. On October 1st, we went back to the public again with a pop-up session that was held at the east parking lot of Jim Uffelmann Park. A series of panels were created to incite conversation and to garner community buy-in before the study was finalized. Attendees were also encouraged to fill out a feedback card where they could provide comments that they felt relevant to the study. And over the 4-hour pop-up, we had approximately 100 plus attendees come up and have a conversation with us. So the Phase 1 ESA, Geotechnical Evaluation and Site Assessments, revealed a great deal of information about the condition of the park. The public engagement revealed what the public believes the character and usage of the park should look like. And to address these findings, a series of 9 recommendations were created that outline considerations for the park in its current state and for years to come. So finding 1, as a whole, the town requires more off-leash dog spaces. It is recommended that Jim Uffelmann Park remain an off-leash area until additional areas are identified for off-leash spaces. It is recommended that the town also develop an off-leash strategy that looks at the town as a whole and makes recommendations for other off-leash areas to help take the pressure off of Jim Uffelmann Park. Finding number 2 was people value having access to the pathways along the Bow River for various recreational activities. It is recommended that Jim Uffelmann remain a multi-use space. However, an education and etiquette program should be developed to help reduce user conflict. Finding number 3, there is evidence of environmental degradation throughout the site requiring attention. It is recommended that sections of the riverbanks be closed and erosion mitigation measures such as live willow staking and revegetation be implemented to help repair and stabilize the riverbanks. Finding 4 was during rain events and spring thaw, standing water becomes a problem along the pathway and throughout the park. It is recommended that areas experiencing standing water be regraded to prevent pooling and issues with surface runoff. Finding 5, winter maintenance along the pathway could be improved, specifically ensuring the pathway doesn't become icy. It is recommended that adjustments are made to the winter snow maintenance program and the cost of using paw-friendly ice melt compared with traditional ice melt be explored in an effort to keep the pathway ice-free during the winter. Finding number 6, recommended lighting along the trail could improve and increase off-peak usage, especially during mornings and evenings in the winter. It is recommended that the installation of dark sky compliant lighting would improve lighting conditions across the park, especially in the winter. Improved lighting would help spread out park usage into non-peak hours, thus reducing some of the pressure on the park during peak hours. Finding 7, dogs access the Bow River for the entire length of the park, even on the steep slopes towards River Avenue. As mentioned in finding number 1, this area should remain an off-leash area until such time other off-leash areas are identified through an off-leash strategy. Finding 8, people access the Bow River from the east end of the park, specifically under the Jack Tennant Bridge. It's recommended that this area under the bridge be maintained as a river access point for everyone. The addition of amenities such as an accessible boat launch could help reduce activities along more sensitive areas elsewhere in the park. And finally, finding number 9, surface water flow is causing erosion within the park. The recommendation, similar to finding number 4, is a thorough review of the site grade should be conducted to find ways to reduce erosion by water concentrating in single locations. So what are the next steps? So this year, 2024, Parks will begin evaluating the current park signage throughout Jim Uffelmann Park based on what we heard from our public engagement process. This evaluation will help us determine what may be missing and where we can make improvements. Along with this evaluation, we will begin work on the creation of an educational and park etiquette program that will include collaboration with our internal partners, as well as recommendations received from the public engagement process as well. Implementation and further recommendations will be considered, prioritized, and presented to Council for consideration in the 2025 budget process. Some of these recommendations and associated high-level cost estimates include erosion mitigation of the river banks through live willow staking and revegetation. Approximately 7,200 meters of the river bank are requiring attention, and based on current industry standards, costs would start at approximately $175,000. A phase 2 ESA and site-specific geotechnical evaluations would need to be conducted prior to any significant enhancements, such as outdoor washrooms, shade structures, or gazebos being added to the park. These assessments would determine if site conditions were suitable for additions such as these and provide critical information when estimating cost budgets for these projects. A phase 2 ESA would range in the ballpark of $30,000, and a geotechnical evaluation could cost approximately $8,000 per proposed structure. Installation of dark sky compliant lighting along the 1.5 kilometer pathway would involve installation of approximately 40 light structures at a spacing of 35 meters. A cost for a project such as this would be approximately $450,000. And consulting services to create a town-wide off-leash strategy would range in the ballpark of $30,000. Similar to this project, an extensive public engagement process would be strongly recommended in the creation of this strategy. And that's what I have.
Thank you for that extensive report. There's lots of information there. Councillor Nagel, kick it off.
Yeah, thanks for the presentation. I have lots of questions. When you addressed erosion towards the end of your presentation, I believe you referred to it as being caused by water. Is it the conclusion of this study that the erosion is mostly due to the river, not from dogs going up and down the path?
It is caused, sorry. It is caused by the fluctuating river levels, as well as the overland drainage in the park. The dogs are not solely causing it, but with the erosion happening, people and dogs going up and down the bank do add to the issue, yes.
And so for erosion control for $175,000, what specifically would that entail?
That would entail a process such as live willow staking and revegetation. There would be nothing engineered is considered within that. So we would be closing down sections of the riverbank, revegetating them, and then moving along down through the 7,200 meters.
And was there any serious consideration or examination given to something like riprap, like the large rocks you see on other
Not at this time, no, there was not.
Do you have any estimation of how much something
I
that would
do
cost?
not, but I could reach out to the consultant and get that.
I'd
Yeah.
be curious. And then when Greystone is completed, is there going to be another easy access path that we could send cyclists to? So at some point in the future, say this Riverside Park is no longer available for cycling, cyclists, please use this. Is that option going to be available when Greystone's done?
That one I'm not 100% sure.
I think in a conceptual sense, yes, we'll have more options. There are a number of pathway connections considered through Greystone, and that will be something we consider in terms of managing the usage of this park, as well as providing the best experience for all types of users, whether they're recreational or commuter based, et cetera. So it does give us more options.
Okay. So yeah, my thoughts on the whole topic, I would love to see most of the recommendations included in the budget. The $450,000 lighting one, in my early assessment is ooh, but I'd love to see it all discussed, deliberated in the budget. And then at some point, I really think we should have a serious conversation about not allowing cyclists to use the whole area. The numbers, I felt, really reinforced that with the study. It was so heavily lopsided towards dogs, and I have personally witnessed dogs being run over by cyclists on numerous occasions, which is at some point going to lead to like a fist fight between people. But all right, that's it. Thank you.
Okay, Councillor Federico?
Thanks for all the information. One, I wanted to say kudos on great public engagement. But I do have a question about that. Was that 1,150 responses just from the survey alone, or was that including all the types of engagement?
That was from the survey alone, yes. So all of the different types of engagement also all led to the survey through various QR codes and paper copies. But yes, it was 1,150 responses to the public survey.
Yeah, that's awesome, and it obviously shows how passionate people are either about biking or dogs, one side or the other, maybe both. Have we ever done another study like this before it was ever Jim Uffelmann Park? Like, is this our first study of its kind on this area, or did we do one, years and years ago?
That I am not sure of. I do not have the history of that.
We are fairly confident, those of us sitting at the bench that have been here for a while, that this is the first one that's been done on the area.
Okay, perfect. And then I guess that just leads kind of into my next question of, I see the next steps, and obviously Councillor Nagel touched on that about, coming back for budget asks. How often will we revisit this type of plan? Like, is it something that, obviously you bring on more dog parks in the future and things like that, like it starts to change, I guess, the overall usage of the park, but is it something that we're gonna look at and say, we'd like to update this at the 5-year mark, the 10-year mark? Was there anything from this study that they brought forward?
Not at this time, no. I definitely think that this is something we should be reviewing on a more regular basis. The park is incredibly popular, and it is feeling the pressures of that popularity. So as more off-leash spaces were to come online for people to use, I think it would be worthwhile to go back and review and see if the current usages and the recommendations that we made were still purposeful.
Yeah, and I kind of consider it as like some of our other infrastructure projects, like actually kind of marking them or storing them, like this has been done, right? Like it's been complete, will be a good message to the community, just so that they get to see a little bit that, we didn't just do a study and then, oh, we've never really done anything with the study, right? Like I think it's really important that we have that follow-up with the community members to actually show like, this is what we've done and this is what we've got and this is from what we've heard, right? I would like to see that in most of our projects that we do. And yeah, other than that, I know that I believe Councillor McFadden with the Parks and Rec group, you guys did look at off-leash dog spaces at one point. Obviously a little bit rough when it's just kind of an advisory group, but whether or not, that 30K, rather than spending it just on an engagement, whether or not there could be a whole other committee that could just be set up where you could actively use people in the community to engage and find out ways, might be something to also consider. This was probably one of the, I think the Parks and Rec group is one of the ones that had the most people who wanted to sit on that advisory committee out of all our boards. So whether or not that could be something that could be looked at from that lens is just a suggestion. But thank you for all the information. It was really great.
Okay, Councillor McFadden.
Yeah, Trish, I wanted to thank you and your team and the team for this report. I'm quite glad to see it and the results of it. I know there was certainly the folks that were talking to me, there's a great deal of fear about this report, that it was going to produce a preordained solution that dog lovers weren't going to like. And so I think anybody who goes through this can see it was very much, looks to be a study that was very much approached with an open mind. You're seeing the pure number of people that engage with it, and we're identifying what their priorities are. I live in the area, it's no secret, and walk my dog there all the time, and some of my happiest moments are walking along that trail and seeing all of these happy people and happy dogs, and then the cyclists coming in through, and like, it's a really happy spot. One of my happy spots in Concord. So I think this is a great report. My understanding of it is this is kind of setting the first stage, because, if you go through there, that site is overloved. It needs, vegetation, the grass is burnt off, both this park and at the one on the highway. You can see the erosion on the banks, and I've had that flagged to me recently that we are gonna have to get a handle on that, because if DFO, if it gets to the level where Department of Fisheries and Oceans is concerned, we could be very restricted in what we're doing with that. So it's very important, I think, to the people of Cochrane that we come up with this. So I'm glad that we're pretty much lining this up to be a solution in next year's budget. So I'm glad to see that. Again, with Councillor Nagel on your price point of what's important, the lights weren't my highest point, but you never know. But yeah, thank you for this study for sure. And I think it will alleviate a lot of concerns out there that the point of the study really was environmentally focused and not a change of use focus. And just a final thought, not related to this one at all, but as I walk through there and I look across the river, I see the south bank is becoming more and more of a unofficial off-leash park. You're seeing some dogs having some pretty good runs through there, and I don't know if that's your side of the lens, but we might need to do some education on that side that it's not off-leash there either. So, but anyhow, a great first step, I think, in addressing something that's very important to our residents, so thank you.
Councillor Reid.
Yeah, thank you for your work, and thank you for the summary. I really appreciate it in terms of being what could have been presented. You talked about the implications of the Trans-Canada Trail. I think that the implications of Greystone would be perhaps as significant, and you didn't reference that, but maybe it goes without saying. If you look at the size of development of Greystone, and we don't have, while we have planned for fabulous pickleball courts, we don't have any dog parks in that subdivision. I think that's a grave error. I notice now that one of the amenities of the new subdivisions in the city of Calgary are dog parks. And so maybe there's something beyond recreation in terms of the planning department that we should be doing in relation to dog parks. The other questions I had were that, as I understand it, this park per se only really goes to the south side, if you will, or the south side of the bridge and not the north side. And there is quite a bit of space on the north side of the bridge. Has any of that ever been thought of as a potential dog park or an opportunity for recreation? And clearly, as I understand it, it's town land.
It does extend a bit past the east parking lot up along the east end connector pathway. I'm not sure if the area has been considered for recreational uses. I do know that there are some storm management water ponds in there that may potentially affect that and underground utilities. Right. But in regards to opportunities, no, I don't think they have been looked at. Okay, and then on the west side of the west parking lot, again, I know that's just pathways, but is it ever any of that area with the parking lot being accessible there considered as a potential dog park? On the west side of River Avenue? Yeah. I'm not sure. I don't believe so. No. Okay. And then like my colleagues, I think that I'm anxious to see the budget discussion, but I have some reservations about lighting. In terms of the spirit of public consultation, before we went ahead with that lighting, would we consult with the residents on the south side of the river who would be looking at that, or potentially, I guess, how it's set up, as well as the residents in the trailer park? Because I know that there are some now, well, I know at least 2 people who have permanent residence in that trailer park. Absolutely. Would that be done as part of, okay, great. I think that was the extent of my questions. Yeah, I think that north side of the river just seems to be an unexplored resource, and it may be some way of being able to offset what really is happening on the south side, where there's so much pressure for dog parks. So thank you again.
Ms. Lowe?
I just wanted to remind council that included in the budget that came forward this year, there is going to be a Bow River strategy as well as a water course strategy, so that may address some of the comments that are being made throughout.
Mayor Janelle.
I appreciate the reminders of what we approved in the budget. Thank you. I have to say I was initially frustrated with this report when I was reading it, but I'm glad I hung in there because the questions I was writing were like, now what? Where's the options? Where are the costs? And you got to it in your presentation. So thank you for that. So I applaud the work that was done. And I think from my perspective and many that I talked to in the community, where there was an expectation of solving a problem with this. And I think you've highlighted well, and my colleagues have talked about some of the pros and cons of that, but planning for continued growth. One of the, and again, not, withholding any or fettering any discussion at a future budget meeting, but my personal preference is that we leave this space natural. And I like what you were talking about with the mitigation strategies on erosion, where it's a natural amenity, not, an engineered one, to use your word. So I appreciate that approach. My opinion only. The other was and I think Councillor McFadden, you touched on this, the risk or the fear of people losing something, whether that be a cyclist, a walker, or an off-leash dog park user. And I'm glad, as Councillor Nagel pointed out, that our study has shown that its primary use is off-leash. Was there any thought given to putting a fence or some type of barrier at the pathway entrances to, and it would, I think, again, in my opinion, change the use of those that are not using it as an off-leash area. So if you had to go through like the double fence as we have at our other off-leash parks, that would really highlight this as an off-leash area. I mean, you could still, if you want, go walk through there. Or as I think my colleagues have pointed out, that there's going to be alternate pathways in Greystone, et cetera. Was that given any consideration?
No, it was actually, one of the points that was really brought home with this report is that this is the only off-leash area in town that has the combination of off-leash and river access. So maintaining that river access for the off-leash dogs was considered extremely important. In regards to other people using the space, not walking their off-leash dogs, but accessing the river for boating or swimming or fishing. That was, I think it was the 8th recommendation about underneath the Jack Tennant Bridge, maintaining that as an access point for all the public, and with the addition of some amenities such as like a boat launch or picnic tables or benches, it would direct some of that activity that is happening along the more sensitive areas along the river down to that area where we're not experiencing any erosion and the impacts are quite minimal.
Okay. So I'm left, I guess, with a couple questions around, and maybe not answered tonight, but some we can take away is, how can we create a safe environment for multi-use, or is the study telling us that it's already safe and we need to continue to do what we're doing?
I believe the study is telling us that it is safe and that both users with off-leash dogs and no off-leash dogs do feel safe while using the park. But again, there's the importance of the creation of a park etiquette program and educational component to basically educate people using the space how to use it safely as a multi-use recreational area.
Yeah, and that was actually my next point, so thank you for taking me there. I really appreciate the signage and the etiquette program. I think that's something we need to undertake, and I hear that might be coming in the next budget, or that you're actually starting some of that work this year. Erosion mitigation, I'm not a big fan of the lights. I think that we can have that discussion at a future date, but sometimes the answer to an area, again, my opinion, is not changing it so we can accommodate more growth or change. It's how can we keep it the way it is and then accommodate that growth in other areas and keep this jewel the way it was and why it's, I think, so loved. So I think, again, my opinion, we need to do a more work in keeping it the way it is than changing it to accommodate shifts in our community. But the last thing, I agree with Councillor Federico, that we need to come up with a now what plan. So my initial reaction was there's 9 findings that I think most people would say, yeah, I knew that already. And I don't mean to be trite about that or dismissive of the report, because I think there's a lot of good stuff in there. But how can we communicate that now with the public, that we're actually going to take action on this and there's going to be next steps? So I think we need to do some work on that too. But thank you for your report tonight, and I appreciate the presentation.
Good. Councillor McFadden.
Sorry, a couple of questions kind of on what might be possible this year. I mean, I know that what you've mapped out is significant budget asks for next year, but I'm wondering, I mean, you would have been prepping this, but I mean, we can see the erosion, and certainly I can see the elements, you know, there's the trails where the dogs go down the bank. Is there anything we can do kind of within this year's budget that we could kind of help with some of those erosion pieces, or even with like some fencing? Because I know like where the campground is, there's some fencing there, so the dogs don't go in there, but there's no fencing whatsoever on the site. And so certainly it's not uncommon to see dogs running off into the different properties. And if there's any potential to maybe even have some sort of fencing to kind of, just to take some smaller steps to kind of corral the use and you just start to mitigate some of that erosion in advance of, if there's anything that could be considered in this year's budget that wouldn't derail from any other priorities. So good luck with squeezing some more dimes out of your existing budget.
Councillor Wilson.
Thanks. I'm mostly happy with the findings of the study. I was hoping to find out that we could use the area as it currently is being used. I'm not in support of pushing walkers or runners or cyclists off that pathway. I think it's functioning pretty well how it is. Glad to hear about the erosion controls and the water pooling ideas. I think those are important. I just had a question about just building on Councillor Reid. To the north of Jack Tennant Bridge, there's a sizable island there that's just outside of the Jim Uffelmann boundaries, according to the map. Just curious, is that town land, and is there any thoughts about utilization of that? I'm pretty sure no is the answer to the second part, but is that town land, the sizable island there?
I can probably help a little bit with that. So that island has come up multiple times. There are several people in the community that are also interested in how the town may in the future utilize that. At this point, it has been left naturalized. It would require significant investment potentially for a connection, as well as an environmental study of what is actually on that site, how it's been used historically, etc. But it's definitely something that's been top of mind over the last year or so since we've started to reinvigorate community services. And I would imagine it would be something that will come up as part of those studies that we've been talking about the watercourse strategy, as well as the riverfront strategy. Though an update on that on those projects will be coming to council in March. But the intention is to how do we preserve what we have and ensure that our pathways along there are protected as well. But the island is definitely something that's been top of mind for recreational uses as well.
Great, thank you for the update.
Okay, just a couple questions that I had or comments. I didn't see anything about geese mentioned in the report. I've seen quite a few dogs chasing the geese down there. Did you hear anything about that?
Not that specifically, just that, you know, people had mentioned the different types of wildlife that they did see in the park. I think that we would be bringing that into part of our environmental stewardship and etiquette program in the park in regards to not just how to use the space, but also how to respect the wildlife within the park.
Okay. And the grass is really worn down every year from all the activity, but do you actually sprinkle grass seed out there in the spring?
No, currently we do not. Establishing turf with that amount of traffic is incredibly difficult. There are some things that we will be looking into in terms of like overseeding and some aeration to improve the condition of the grass and hopefully help it mitigate itself through some of that the foot traffic that is going through the park every day. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
I'm really glad to see it stay multi-purpose. I've been going there since 1991, so I've seen an increase in traffic. But it's only going to get busier with Greystone and all the new dogs that are going to move into there. Mm-hmm. So I'd love to see brought forward at the next report some ideas about where else we could start a park, whether it's town land or new developments or whatever.
Absolutely. And
we've known. Sorry.
I'm sorry, I thought you were finished there. When we were looking at the project as well, one number that did pop up, we do have 4,060 licensed dogs in town. So as you mentioned, as the development occurs and people bring their furry friends to town with them, they're definitely going to be experiencing some more pressure in our green spaces and along that dog park, because it is so well-loved.
Yeah, I'd love to see some more choices in town just to spread it out, because it is going to get harder and harder. What else did I have? I guess that was it for me. Thank you so much for your report and all the information, and we look forward to hearing more about this.
Thank you.
So now I guess it's time to go in camera. Could I have a motion to go in camera?
Also moved.
Councillor Wilson, I guess. All in favor? Carried unanimously. It's 9:16. So we'll just wait a few minutes for the feed to stop.